Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the First Draft Podcast.
Yes.
We're going to be exploring a topic that we've been discussing off camera amongst ourselves for quite a while. And we may actually go into this in a future episode more in depth. I'm sure you've seen this on your feed. If you're on X or TikTok or whatever, prominent figures have brought this up, is the birth rates or fertility rates for this country specifically. Something I've been wanting to explore for a while. And yeah, it's a weird phenomenon, and it merits some conversation on it. So we're going to try and talk about that here it's just a strange phenomenon. So
why do you say it's strange?
Any market change is strange, and you have to wonder why the change happens. Yeah. Typically trends just go in the same direction.
They level out.
And not level, well, the change in the trend levels out, depending what kind of trend you're following, which means that the trend itself is linear. But when any market change happens, it's important to explore why it's happening. So
that makes sense.
This is it's like I said, everyone's probably seen it on their timeline and wondering why is everyone concerned with this figure, and I think it's important to explore. So here's a couple data points. In the U.S., the fertility rate, and this is the birth rate for women
per woman,
is 1.6 to 1.7. That's what I have written down. Is that
that's low?
What was the average, or
less than 2 kids?
Right. Okay. So the replacement,
the fertility rate in the U.S. is currently around 1.6 to 1.7 children.
Okay, cool.
So
we got our figures correct.
Wow, that's lower than I thought.
But you have to round that to 2, right?
No.
Why? Because you can't have a half a kid.
Well, no, because some women have more, some women have less. So
but
that averages out.
I mean, a 0.5, you would have to round that to.
No,
you just have to not understand it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go into it more. It's 1.6 to 1.7 children per female. Obviously, it takes 2 to tango. So that means for every 2 people, only a little over 1.5 children are being produced. The replacement rate is 2.1. I'm assuming that 0.1 is what negates entropy, which is a little bit different subject. But if you just have 2 per 2, there's natural decay that occurs. So you have to be outpacing natural decay a little bit.
Yeah.
So you got to add a little point. You got to add something in there, which makes sense. And obviously, this is not humans. They take so long to mature, and it's it doesn't really. You're not going to see the effects of this tomorrow, but it's something that is pertains to our future. So in 100 years from now, you're going to.
I think less. I think in like 30 years from now.
Probably in about 50 years, it's going to be, society will be radically changed, not only by this, but by other things too. It's worth exploring why it's going on. And yeah, that's what we're going to delve into for this particular segment.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah,
I had some stats here if you all wanted me to add to it.
Sure.
Well, what's your opinion about it? Do you think it's a good thing for society? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think it could be relegated to your position in life? Like, should younger women have more children versus people that are more mature, such as me and you? Or like, how do you feel about that?
Well, as far as how I feel about those numbers, I think that
it's scary to you.
No, not just to me. Like, society will collapse. You cannot have you cannot have 1.6 to 1.7 as the fertility rate and expect to be around in 100 years. The US as we know it will collapse. You have to have the younger coming in to not just replace the older, but to also take care of them, you know? Can't put every single elderly person in a nursing home necessarily, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I'm not sure. Basically, if the replacement rate is 2.1, anything below it will lead to the collapse of the society.
Over
So
time.
over time,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's 100 years. I think it's a lot less than that. I think it's probably in the next 1.5 generations, because there does come a point where you can't you can't outpace the collapse. You
Correct.
can't start having, even
Correct.
if everyone starts having 6 kids, it's too late. There comes a point where you can't track it back. Like there will be a substantial collapse regardless of what we do, and I don't know what that pace is, but I don't see it slowing down, and that's what I think is scary, because I know a lot of people that have made the decision to not have any kids,
Mhm.
and it's becoming more the norm, and number quantitatively and morally. It's like not even looked at as anything weird or different anymore. And to a certain extent, I think that I'm not saying we should shame people for deciding not to have kids, but we should, if we're not asking the questions of why to each individual, because that would be shaming someone, we should be asking it on a like macro, questioning it, so that when people are tuning in to YouTube or to the news or whatever, they can see that, you know, their decisions are and will affect the population moving forward.
I wanted to go into
If that birth rate doesn't go up to 2.1, I don't know what the time is, and we could probably look it up.
And
Our society will collapse.
And I want an understanding of replacement. Do you mean a new life to replace somebody that dies? Because the problem is, in my opinion, when we discuss this topic, especially from a more conservative standpoint, like I know that sometimes they take the position of, let's go back in time to the baby boomer generation, or even before then, where people just had multiple kids. But I think that was a solution to the problem of lifespan. People didn't live as long as we live now. And so I'd like to look at the perception of this problem through the lens of our lifespan. So when you say replace, I don't know, maybe this is something he can look up. Replace what? The people that die off? So you're telling me that there's not enough people to replace the people that have
Correct.
died off?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
That are dying.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So you have more people. You have more
I can
people.
look up more info.
Actually, it hasn't. The peak hasn't happened yet. I can't recall the death rate versus the birth rate, but the rates of those change. The rates of those changes are changing themselves, and in the near future, if everything stays the same, you're going to see more people dying and not enough people replacing. It's already happening in other countries.
Here we go. I looked it up. When a country's fertility rate falls below the replacement level, the population ages and shrinks, which can have several consequences. Population decline: a generation doesn't produce enough children to replace itself, which leads to a population decline. Strained government budgets: a shrinking population can strain government budgets. I guess what they're okay. That is at the bottom.
I want to know the definition of replacement level.
A shrinking population can slow economic growth. A shrinking population can lead to a decline in the labor force. A shrinking working age population relative to older retired individuals can strain programs like Social Security and Medicare. The replacement level is the number of births needed to maintain a population, accounting for deaths moving, and other reasons. In developed
it accounts for death.
countries,
So, and it also accounts for moving, though, right?
out of the
Moving-
country.
Out of the country.
In
Maybe we're
developed
out of the
countries, the replacement level is typically around 2.1 children per woman. However, countries with high infant and child mortality rates may need a higher average number.
Yep, that makes sense.
Moving out
Some
of the
nations
country,
with
right?
sub-replace, okay, something to help reduce fertility. Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to add to the reasons why it's purported that people are not having as many kids. One is careers. People are prioritizing careers. People claim that the cost of raising a child is too high.
I was going to say economics.
Economics, the time spent on them, I guess in the time investment is too high, and then I guess strain on marriage, which has all these other things kind of tied into it. But yeah, that's it does seem troubling that, like I said, nothing we'll probably see in our lifetimes that will affect us too much. But our kids would see the effects of this
Yeah.
at some point. Now, I've heard countering narratives which suggest that AI would be able to do all of the
To have
physical
babies?
work of what these people provide, I suppose, which is interesting, I guess. Like if you had automated assistants performing all these tasks, then you don't need that population. But I don't know. That's way too far into the
AI
future.
could help with the task you need to do to raise a child, like
Yeah,
like
you can
the
nanny assistants and stuff. Yeah,
like I'm talking about the very mechanical
Right,
versions
right.
Of assistance, not like being a parent and like instilling values and
Mhm.
morals and ethics. I'm just talking about like,
I
hey,
know the planning and the day-to-day
yeah,
monotonous
like
things.
you know, I got a Tesla, you can drive my kid to school while I can go to work, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about
No, I
the
get it.
instilling of values and morals. Yeah, I'm just really interested in this topic too because I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit torn, and I guess I have this opinion because I'm older and I also already have a kid, so I
Right.
feel like it's a selfish position to take because I'm saying, hey, I don't think there's anything wrong if you choose not to have kids, but I'm saying that from the position I'm at in life, and I've also already had a kid, and I don't want more kids, and so that's a different perspective to tell somebody that's never had a kid and are now choosing not to have a kid. So I don't know. I'm torn because it's like I guess I'm looking at it through a subjective lens instead of an objective lens.
Yeah.
That
It's like
leaves
you're
my position kind
yeah.
of weak. It's not a fortress that I can
Yeah. Like you're
certify or
saying,
submit.
how can I say it's okay when I have a kid? I don't
Right.
know what it feels like for me to come from that place, you know? And it does
I
say,
don't think it's a bad thing morally or ethically
yeah.
because like we've discussed,
I mean, it's not a crime.
camera,
Right.
like there is a philosophy called antinatalism, which suggests that having more kids or bringing people into the world creates more suffering. So I think that's something that should be discussed. But that's
Not just creates more suffering. Antinatalism also said it's not moral to bring kids into a world that is full of suffering.
Yes, that's actually
yes.
So
So by nature, bringing more kids into the world, you're
it's
gonna amplify the suffering because like you're just perpetuating.
That's pretty much what they say. Yeah.
You're just perpetuating suffering.
You're bringing kids into suffer.
Yeah.
Into a suffering world is the thing. Like, why would you do that? That's what antinatalism definition seems to be from what he read off. But to me, I guess I wish I would have had more kids, and I have one amazing kid, and I'm so happy. And he has a brother and a sister from his dad's side, so that he doesn't. I didn't take away him being a brother or a sister. Thank God he has a brother and a sister, and he can be a brother there. But if I didn't have any other kids, which I didn't, and he didn't have a brother or sister, I do think I'd be a lot more upset in life right now because I didn't think about these things until more recently.
Right, right.
And I just think, like, have you seen pictures like of people and they start out, here's just a couple. And then like 5 years later, here's a couple and their two kids. And then another, like, let's say 20 years later, here's a couple, their two kids, and then their spouses. And then a few years later, here's a couple, their
I've
two
seen that,
kids,
yeah.
their spouses, and then their two kids.
Mhm.
And it is just like the most
You create a
beautiful,
whole family tree at
it's a
that point.
whole beautiful thing to see. Like, we were walking with my mom and me and her three grandkids recently, and they were in the front. I was talking to her, and so proudly, she's like, this whole line came from me, you
Yeah.
know. And I looked, and it's like so true, and it's such a beautiful thing to see, you know. And ultimately, yes, I have friends and coworkers that have chosen not to have kids, and I think that they're totally okay with this decision
I agree.
right now.
Right
I'm
now.
okay with their decision.
Right now, they're okay with this
Yeah.
decision. But it's such a big decision that, because there comes a time where you are more okay with a decision when you can choose to go either way. But the moment you cross a line and you can no longer go backwards and say, oh, never mind, now I do want to have kids, right? The moment that option is no longer available, like for a woman biologically, that's when something deep can set in. Like, what did I just do? What did I do? You know, that's the moment where, you know, we keep growing in life and changing. And it's a final decision, is what I'm saying. It's okay to make that decision when you're 25, 26, 27, 28, maybe 29, 30, 31. Maybe it's not even ideal, but you still have the decision, like, you still have the capability, assuming biologically and all that, everything's okay, that you can, like, go back on that decision. But once you're 46 and 45, if you change your mind, that's it. It's too bad. And that's such a big decision at that it becomes a huge decision. The decision becomes bigger the older you get, is what I'm saying.
I guess what I'm thinking about, since our first discussion was so tech involved, is maybe technology can find a solution to our replacement level in multiple ways. Because IVF is a thing, and I think we were talking about like that, like is IVF something me and you talked about off camera along like maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we were talking about clones and IVF, and if like maybe that's a point where technology can replace the actual physical necessity of the production, but then you have to figure out who wants to be a parent to those children or those offspring. But
What
there
do you
are
mean?
people.
Because the people themselves are the parents,
Well,
the ones who
sometimes people
decide
like
to.
that. Have you seen that dude? I don't know his name. You may have to look him up, Calvin. There's a dude that's on Vlad right now that did an interview where he donated to sperm banks, and purportedly has like 100 children or something.
Mhm.
And so he he basically, I mean, he's not the
I think there's a lot of moral,
traditional father role, but he's the
ethical.
biological father of all these offspring. And I think that's, I'm not saying that what he did was morally or ethically right, but I think there comes a point where tech can optimize that process. And I guess that brings up more ethical questions. But I don't know. I have a friend that biologically a female that cannot have children, and she wants to have children, and she would be willing to adopt a child or take on children. And so it becomes a point of the actual technical aspect of reproduction, and then who wants to be a parent, which is, I think, is even a greater ethical dilemma at that point. I don't know, or a moral dilemma, or a question, or like a problem we need to find a solution to. So I don't know. I just think that there's other ways around this problem. I don't think it's the traditional way, and I guess that's where I probably disagree with you both. I don't think that people making the choice to have not have children is ethically wrong, and I think there's other alternatives that we need to look into to replace replacement level.
Well, let's
or to fuel the replacement level. I don't
Sure.
like to use the double. I always do that.
I'd like to explore your last statement. You said that people there is no ethical component to it, and it's
No,
just
I
a
said
choice.
there is probably an ethical dilemma.
But you're
Okay,
not
a
concerned
dilemma.
about that
But
part of
the
it. That's what you said?
I'm concerned about it, but I'm wondering if there's a way to address it through tech.
That
Well,
sounds
you
like an
still need
oxymoron right there. Like, how can we
is.
address a moral, ethical dilemma through AI?
Not AI.
not
Like,
necessarily
or
AI.
through
Is,
tech,
AI is a
through
tool.
tech, sorry, through tech.
Well, technology is a tool, but in this particular context, you are interfering with the origin and destiny of human life. So that creates moral implications in and of itself, as well. And more to, in addition to that, I'm curious if you can't have if having kids or not having kids is if there are no ethics involved, or you don't have an religious people would say you have an obligation to do that. Secular people would say it's a personal choice, whatever. You still do have to, according to natural law, not even according to natural law, you still do have to replace the current, even if it is at,
it's just production.
even if it is. So, what if? And this is a hypothetical. Sure, they're fun to engage.
It's just a scientific process of combining a sperm with an egg.
Right. So, who should be engaging in that process? Because obviously, I think you would agree that
I think we've had this discussion.
if everyone made that decision, hey, I don't want to take care of kids, I'd rather take care of dogs or do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But if everyone made that decision,
That's crazy.
then we go extinct.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So someone has to reproduce. So who should be doing that work?
I think we even asked the opposite question: who shouldn't be doing that work too? Right? I think that's something that we got.
As long as we're making a distinction, so who should be doing it and who shouldn't be doing it?
Yeah.
And you would say, well, give it up to everyone.
Like,
Whoever
who shouldn't be doing in the sense
should.
of like, we'll just like not let them?
No, not let them. Like, is there any situation where two parents or two potential parents should not have a kid?
That is a totally different topic, though.
Oh, I know, but yeah. I mean, you have to.
I don't want to even think about in those terms. Like, for this topic, or I don't know, I would have to think about that just because that reminds me so much of like censoring and stuff. Oh. It's like, why am I don't even want to think about who shouldn't. Like, in my mind, who am I to be like, you shouldn't because you can't support a kid or you can't be responsible enough. You can't, like having kids changes people, and like, they could be responsible.
Who should have kids?
But like something I thought.
But I think who should have kids? I do like that question.
Who should have kids if you're not obligated to, and I mean, if you're not obligated to, and you don't want to have them, and whatever. But if everyone makes that decision, then we go extinct. So someone has to be having the kids. So who's having the kids?
Like, I think about it. I won't name the particular actor, but like it's something that it ties back to an earlier conversation when we talked about age differences in dating. But I think it's unethical for like a 70-year-old man, even though he can biologically create a kid, to find a young woman to have a kid with, knowing that he's gonna die and like not be able to be a father. Like, should he have kids just because he's able to and because it will help?
I love that
replacement level.
I love that, but then
ethical dilemma.
But I guess if our species is dying, then
but then you think it's okay to use technology to just unite a sperm and an egg? Because at least I agree with you, but at least a 70-year-old man would be an actual human being, not just a sperm.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying when we talk about ethical issues, is that ethically correct?
But but did you ask that same question about what you said about using technology to solve the replacement thing?
I did. I'm just saying that could be an alternative solution. But I'm not saying that could be the.
But how could that even be an alternative solution?
That should be the end all be all.
No, my question is, how could that even?
The process. It just should be.
It should. But it's if you think a 70-year-old having a child with a 35-year-old, which I don't disagree with you when he's at the end. Towards the end of his life is wrong. How is it even conceivable to think about using technology to join a sperm and an egg to make a human even a possibility in your mind, which seems so much more unethical.
I don't disagree, but like if you have genuine parents that are looking to adopt and would take on that offspring and give it a better life potentially than what may have occurred naturally, like I don't have a problem.
I'm not
with
talking
that.
about adoption. I'm talking about
Well, somebody
where
has to
you
be a
said the
parent.
IVF. You said the
Yeah, well, somebody
IVF.
has to take on that
Okay,
offspring and be
right,
parents, right?
right.
I'm not just saying like
But you're
just create a bunch of people and just let them sit in
no,
the
I
jail
know you're
cell
not saying
and
that.
unleash them when we need them to work for us in communism or some BS like that. I'm saying like people that don't want to be parents can participate and provide the elements to reproduce and then hand it over to
But that's
parents
available
that
right now with IVF. It's just so expensive.
yeah,
But
you
there
know,
are
you
a
can
lot
check
of
that with the
ethical,
cost of that would
to me,
decrease.
ethical situations with the IVF because you're a lot of times a lot of the issues I'm seeing is you're creating like a whole embryo, what is it, zygote, embryo, whatever, in these little petri dishes, and you're freezing them, and then you're inserting 14 of them in you so you can have one, and then once you have your one, let's say a couple is good, they're like, well, I don't want the other 15 that are on ice. It's like, well, but other 15
Correct.
have
Yeah.
already had the spark of life.
Yeah.
Like I don't pretend as a
Yeah, it's
Christian to be able to make a non-Christian person understand how wrong that is. In my point of view, I'm not going to force my point of view down someone's throat, but I think that is a really big ethical dilemma. It's akin to abortion because a lot of times, like, there are other couples that can come in and decide to purchase or whatever, take on those fertilized eggs, but not always. Sometimes, a lot of times, I'm sure they're discarded, right?
Yeah.
I bring up that point to say there are ethical dilemmas with IVF and the way it's done. And the thing that I think that I would challenge my fellow Christians is if you are going to have IVF, don't get every one of those embryos implanted in you. Be responsible at least with that. And if that scares you, then have less of them fertilized. Don't leave any on the table, because if you think abortion is wrong, then you have to think that's wrong. They're
That's another
still
conversation.
fertilized.
IVF is wrong.
I think IVF, if you're leaving a bunch of fertilized eggs behind, is wrong.
But you don't think the process itself is wrong?
I don't necessarily.
If you biologically, like if you're a woman that can't have a child. Or
No, I don't necessarily think that's wrong. I know there are people that think the whole IVF industry is wrong, and that might be because it's plagued with a lot of like unregulated things like that, but if you really think about it, you got a bunch of like, preborns on ice, and then you're like, what do we do with them? Throw them away. It's like, what?
So that's a conversation I actually do want to table for another day. It is. I mean, it's huge, but we have, yeah.
Let me
let's
say.
wrap-
I think
let's
we're gonna
wrap
have
up.
to revisit this topic. But
I
it's so
said that at the
interesting,
beginning.
it's
Yeah,
so multifaceted.
it is. Yeah,
it leads to a bunch of different roads to.
Let me say this statistics I wrote down in 2018. 37% of 18 to 49-year-olds said it's not too likely or not at all likely that they would have children. In 2021, 44% of 18 to 49-year-olds are saying it's not too likely or not at all likely that they would have children.
So that's a 15% increase.
No,
I'm
37
sorry,
to 44. 37%. And then
that's
44.
crazy.
That's a 7% increase. So
no. That's actually a
increase.
Oh, is that 37%?
37. That's 37. Now it's 44, and that was 3 years ago. So in 3 years,
it's more than a 7% increase.
37 to 44.
Yeah, but you're doing
what?
It's more. Just continue.
No,
Go
tell
ahead,
me
continue.
how. Tell me how.
We're not gonna. Yeah, it's 37%, and then it was 44%. You have to do 7 divided. Well, it doesn't matter. Just continue.
Okay.
Yes.
So in 2018, 37% said they don't see themselves having kids. 3 years later, 44%. I see what you're saying because they're still in the same group. 3 years later, like some of
Yes.
these are still in the same group.
Yeah.
But the new ones coming in are also saying that. That's why that percentage is going up.
And does that account for people like those people? I just want to say from 30 to 40.
Hold on,
does
what's
that
the
account
stat?
for people like have those 30 to 44-year-olds already had a kid and they're saying I don't want any kids in the future?
No, these are all people that are kidless.
That are kidless.
Still
Okay,
kidless.
Okay,
So I want to
clarify
see
that.
this statistic 3 years
Mhm.
later from here, saying in 2024, and maybe that'll be available in 2025.
Mhm.
But if that goes up another 7% or 3%, I mean, that's going to be scary, like
So
more
then
and
what's
more.
the solution?
Yeah, I have no
Encourage
idea.
people to have more kids,
Encourage.
or do we come up with
Yes, but we're gonna have to explore that on another episode because that's it's gonna be a huge.
Maybe
I mean, how do you convince people
make
to
this
a
part 2 of a
Yeah.
topic?
Yeah,
never
we
done
could.
I think so. I
that.
think
We
so.
could.
Yeah.
That allows us to also do more research.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
this is a great topic.
It is. And I want to end it with this. If we are created beings and put here on this earth for a reason, is that reason to work and have double income, no kids, and go on all these vacations every year and cruise around the world
That's
and
another
have
conversation. Yeah.
and have like
Another
what is,
conversation.
because all those things seem really shallow for like the miracle of life that we are here, like we're all miracles to even be here, like what is the most meaningful thing anyone can have in life, and it's their children. What is the most meaningful thing in your life? It's your child. And so is mine.
But let me reflect on a question you asked me earlier. You said, do I regret not having more children? I don't.
But you have one.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And that's where I kind of seesaw back and forth between having more children and this
I think
concept
from having
of antinatalism. Like, is it always right just to have a bunch of children just because you can?
No, nobody's saying that.
Oh, I know that. I'm just saying, but I've heard certain political pundits say that though. Like, they're like, just have more children, and they never talk about the aftercare of the children after they're born.
Are you sure they don't talk about it, or they just didn't talk about it in that segment? And I will say this: from having 0 kids to having 1 kid, and we're wrapping it up. But that's those are 2 worlds apart. Having 1 kid to having 2 kids, that's in the same ballpark. It's in the same. Having none to having 1 is just not even in the same field. So yeah, you may only have 1, but you have 1.
Yeah, and I like to leave it.
Yeah.
Well, what I don't know, fascinating topic, and we have to explore this in the next, or maybe not the next one, but in the future for sure. There's a lot more I want to add to this, and yeah,
I think we need to do maybe a part 2 and a part 3.
I think so. Yeah, it's warranted. So yes, we'll do it. So yeah, let's wrap it up and move on, or yeah.